Well, he was going to, I mean,
There's a lot of people who go to the gym that listen to this.
Yeah, totally. Sure. I mean, this is, which is great. Yeah. So they don't need actually the beginner protocol. You can actually, get into the gym, 4:45 to 5:45, whatever it happens to be, whatever, your results may vary. But the whole point is, and let your mind wander when you're doing that. Let your mind wander. Let your mind take you where your mind is supposed to go. And then actually is to work on the soul part of it with meditation or worship or whatever that thing, actually reading the Stoic Masters, whatever it is. And only then administer psychostimulants, aka drink coffee, and then start your day. By the way, that optimizes your creative potential. You'll get 3 to 4 hours of very, very strong concentration of dopamine in the prefrontal cortex, which gives you focus and creativity and will make you extremely productive. Yeah. But you will have started your day with questions of meaning. Yeah. And that's how you start. That's how you get the jump on actually solving the issues of what's my life all about, man.
I've heard you say this before, and I thought, hang on, okay, so it's quite easy for me to do. I can just wake up, go walk along this beach. I have my little route, which I do. And when you said do it without any devices, I thought, yeah, because that's going to drastically affect what that walk is going to be like. Either I'm going to be blasting myself with music or listening to a podcast or just going through my phone versus being forced to be listening to my thoughts.
Presence.
Yeah.
You need to actually have presence, and you need to let your default mode network take you where you need to go synaptically, so you can actually be considering questions that don't have answers. That's really what the default mode network is doing, is taking you to big questions the big questions of life don't have answers. They only have understanding. Somebody would, if you asked me, my wife's name is Esther. We've been married 33 years. I love my wife. You say, why do you love your wife? Anything I told you would sound stupid and trite and trivial, would trivialize it. I understand it, but I don't have answers. That's an understanding that you get, but it actually requires that you allow your brain to gain understanding, and you won't get it if you turn on the anti-boredom machine. A huge problem in our society today.
Could you also say the same if you're constantly surrounded by people, that you're not getting that alone time?
Yep.
Because this is one thing which I've noticed. I think it was a massive shift for me where throughout my time in university, I was living with people.
Right.
I was living with like 6 guys.
Right.
It was lots of fun, but it was like we were constantly with each other. Then after that, I continued to stay in Newcastle. I was living with people. So I realized there wasn't really much opportunity for me to get time to myself, to think, to read, to listen to a podcast. Even though podcasts weren't really that big back in the day, I still didn't have that alone time. And the biggest shift for me, where everything started to change and my career started to basically blow up, was when I moved to London. And that was 26 years old. It was the first time that I lived by myself. So I moved down there, moved into, at the time, an apartment, which I couldn't afford, but that obviously motivated me to work. But it was my first experience of being like alone and not necessarily having like a group of friends in London.
Right.
Now, I found that was amazing because all of a sudden I was having all of this alone time for me to think and reflect and sort of plan where it is that I wanted to go. I could do all my work uninterrupted, and it was amazing. But on the flip side, I don't think I'd prepared myself for what it would actually feel like. And I should have made more of an effort to actually still have some social life in the balance.
Right.
Because it went from one end to the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's too much. For sure. You got the benefit of it, but you also paid a pretty heavy price because, you need friends in your life. You need relationships. This is one of the reasons that people get so depressed and really alienated from their lives when they're working on Zoom. Now, the neurophysiology of this is pretty straightforward. We have a neuropeptide in the brain called oxytocin. You've heard of this. This is also known as the love molecule. You get it from eye contact and touch. This is why this is a much more effective conversation that we're having in person as opposed to if we were doing it on Zoom. Yeah. And people who are living by themselves and on Zoom all the time, they get no oxytocin. Then they start to find that they're struggling with insomnia. They're eating too many highly glycemic carbohydrates, and all of this kind of thing is because they're actually not getting enough of, their neurochemistry is off. And so if you go from one end to the other, if you have, too much stimulus and too much social life, you're not going to have enough alone time. So your default mode network is never being instigated.
Yeah.
Then you go to being by yourself all the time. You don't have enough oxytocin. This is, in ancient times, we would have enough boredom when we were out in the fields and enough family time when we were back in the cave.
I never understood it, because this is when I was doing online coaching, and I was probably speaking to like 4 people at least every day.
Yeah.
So having conversations, but I was like, why does it still feel
awful.
like something's missing?
It's the worst. It's the worst because your brain was craving oxytocin.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. This doesn't feel right. People will move someplace where they think it's going to be really, really great, and then commute virtually, and then wonder why they're getting unhappier despite all the fact that all their dreams came true.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, because you actually need humans in the right dose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I think now, even though I'd probably say I'm more introverted than extroverted for sure.
Are you?
Yeah. Even though if you watch my YouTube videos and obviously doing what I'm doing, you would probably think, oh, really extroverted guy. But I've really had to force myself to come out of my shell to go down that path.